Hello, everybody, and welcome to my very first revisit episode. Hi, Ghouligans. Hi, True Crime Coven. Hi, everybody else who is just now joining. Welcome. Welcome to the Coven. Doing something a little different this week. As you guys know, I am on vacation right now. Or maybe you don't know that. Maybe you didn't listen to the last episode, but I am. I'm on vacation. So you're about to listen to a little episode revisit in all of its early days of audio and editing glory. It was very hard for me to listen to this again and make sure that it was okay to use as a revisit episode. I was cringing and sweating, and I just can't stand it. So I hope you enjoy it. This is a very interesting story. It is still technically unsolved. It has been unsolved for over 100 years. And I say technically because I have a lot of opinions about this one. And I would love to hear yours too at the end if you get through this. And just so you guys know, when I say revisit, it is not remastered. This is just raw, not remastered in any way, did not fix the audio, did not go in and edit anything out. I wanted to very badly. I wanted to edit so much. But you know what? I suffered through it, and now you get to also do that. You guys are genuinely the best fans ever, the best people ever for sticking through shit like this. So don't worry, next week we will be back to our regularly scheduled program and we will have a good paranormal episode for you with up to date skills and audio. So here it is. Without any further ado, this is The Murder of Rose Harsent, also known as the Peasenhall Murder. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Welcome back. It's episode 3. Thank you for joining me once again. I'm still the host. My name is Taylor Seraphin, and this is Suspects and Spirits. If you're just joining, hi, welcome. Welcome to episode number 3. You are not far behind. Easy to catch up. Go ahead and go listen to episode 1 and 2 if you haven't already. How's everybody doing today? We good? Everyone okay? I know the state of the world can be like just, a shit show sometimes. So I hope everyone's doing all right. I've been pretty good. Summer has started. So that's nice. We're going to be going camping with the kids and bringing the dog along. So yeah, it's going to be a fun time. I've been watching, I know, don't get mad at me. All you fans out there who might like this show as well. Don't be like, oh my God, you just started watching. I've been watching Yellow Jackets. Yellow Jackets is so good. I'm obsessed. I don't know why I waited so long. So, you have every reason to be upset with me because what took me so long, I don't even know. I love every single thing about that show. Christina Ricci, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I've loved her forever. I'm such a fangirl for her. I thought I loved her before. Her character in this show, Misty, is so unhinged. I love her. Her character is just, oh my God, phenomenal. It's probably one of the best shows I've watched in a long time. I'm watching that. I'm catching up on Handmaid's Tale. I haven't really been able to watch a lot during the school year. So in the summer is like when I try and catch up, other than doing like lesson plans and running after my children and sports and all of that. I enjoy TV every once in a while. I feel like the last TV show I was really, really into was probably Peaky Blinders. That was one of my favorite shows of all time. I'm like patiently waiting for this freaking movie to come out. They keep teasing me I almost said on Netflix, which is true, but they keep teasing me on Instagram. I'm so tired of waiting, but I know it'll be worth the wait. Cillian Murphy is amazing. I will watch him in everything he does. So, other than that, I mean, that's pretty much it. I started a podcast, so that's cool. But this has been in the process since like January. Some of you are like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me you started a podcast? Well, because I didn't know if I was going to follow through with it. It's a lot of work, guys. I mean, people joke that like, oh, anyone can start a podcast. And yeah, anybody can. Truthfully, anyone can. Like you can go tomorrow and decide to start one. But it takes a lot of work, and especially with the genre that I have committed to, this is a lot of research. I feel like I'm doing a book report, and then I record it, and I have to edit, and I will say the hardest part about this has been probably just the technical aspects. So, yeah, anyone can start a podcast, but it's a lot more work than it seems. I'm doing the best I can. I mean, it's not easy. All right. Well, you guys are probably tired of hearing me just blabber on about TV and whatnot. You came here for a story. Today's sources, I used a podcast called Was Justice Served? And then there was actually a YouTube video that I found by an account called Briefcase. Really, really good account. I kind of went down a rabbit hole with them. But the one that I use for this is called The Mysterious and Chilling Case of Rose Harsent. And then I also used a Wikipedia article titled The Peasenhall Murder. This took place in England. So it's either Peasenhall or Peasenhall, but there's no T, and it sounds like there's a T, but there's not. We are going to be taking a little time machine back to the early 1900s to a relatively frustrating story. I'm not going to lie. This is the murder of Rose Harsent, and it is a cold case. It is still unsolved, and it has been over a century. So, a little bit frustrating. Let's get into who Rose Harsent was. So, Rose Annie Harsent was born on December 27th to William Peter Harsent and Betty Elizabeth in Peasenhall, Suffolk. She had kind of the ideal upbringing in a really beautiful town. From what I gathered, she was the only daughter of 7, so 6 sons. Needless to say, she was very loved and well looked after. There's not a whole lot about her relationship with her parents that I could find, but there was enough to show that they had a pretty normal life and there weren't really any like big issues that came up in the family. She was really loved and well tended to as the only girl. And it seems like they all had a really good upbringing and a very pleasant relationship overall. Rose attended the local primary school, and at this time, this was a huge deal. This was a time of progress for children in England and especially girls. The 1880 Education Act made school at this time, it made it mandatory for kids to go to school. So they had an attendance compulsory act for children between the ages of 5 and 10. Girls and boys now had access to free education, which they didn't have before. So, this led to a reduction in child labor and a vast improvement in literacy rates across England. However, even though this was really good, the social norms at the time still held women back in a lot of different ways. So, ultimately, Rose got to go to school, but she was held back by the norms of society. So by the time she completed her schooling, which was in 1902, she was in her 20s and she had been a domestic servant for quite some time already, a very common job for women at this time. She was working for the Crisp family and they lived in what was called the Providence House. Rose was said to be very attractive, but also described as really shy and reserved. She was very polite, very courteous, but she really didn't socialize much. She was very active in her church community. She went to the Primitive Methodist Church, which was just outside of Peasenhall in Sipton. It was said to be a short walk from where she lived, and she sang in the choir there, and she participated in all kinds of church events. So, just really active in that community. Rose's life was pretty quiet and isolated at the Providence House. She was given a pretty small bedroom in the attic with a tiny window, and that was typical for the time. She was basically a maid, and that was the maid's quarters. She had very little social interaction outside of her job. Her boss, Mrs. Crisp, was also a regular churchgoer. And she went to a different church, though, called the Wesleyan Methodist Church in Peasenhall, also known as the Doctor's Chapel. And her husband, Mr. Crisp, served as a church deacon. Rose actually had to clean the chapel and maintain the cleanliness for the congregation as part of her job with that family. So not only was she a regular at her church, she was also helping out in their church too. On May 31st, 1902, Rose had completed all of her tasks as normal and was getting ready for bed that evening. A storm was coming in, and this was a really, really big storm with extremely loud thunder and huge bolts of lightning that just lit up the sky. Now, England is known for its rainy weather, and this storm was not out of the ordinary, but it was big enough to cause some concern for Rose's parents, who were a short distance from her job as a domestic servant at Providence Hall. But Rose wasn't really concerned like any typical 20 something year old. She was like, it's fine. It's a big storm. She wasn't concerned about that. She was actually thinking about a letter she had received earlier that day. This letter that she received read, quote, "Dear R, I will try to see you tonight at 12 o'clock at your place. If you put a light on in your window at 10 for about 10 minutes, you can then put it out again. Don't have a light in your room at 12, as I will come around the back way." End quote. Rose read this letter and she was like, okay, I'm going to do what this letter says to do. And as we can tell, this is from some kind of a suitor, right? This was from a boy or a young gentleman who was writing to Rose. So Rose did as the letter said. Later on, though, as the storm rolled on and being the only daughter in her family, her father decided he wanted to go check on Rose the next morning. He had some fresh linens, laundry that he had to return to her anyways. So on June 1st, the following day, her father made his way over to her work at the Providence house. As he made his way around the back, it was a quiet morning with no sign of anything unusual. However, we know why we're here. We know it's coming. When he entered the house, he would make a horrifying discovery. Her father, this poor man, had stumbled upon every parent's worst nightmare. When he came into the house, he saw a pool of blood and his daughter's body on the floor. Rose's throat had been slit from ear to ear, and there were deep gashes on her shoulders and even several stab wounds. Her nightdress was burned, and parts of her body were charred as if someone had tried to dispose of the body by burning it, but they maybe weren't successful. It was clear that she had been there for several hours. So there was a man, Constable Eli Nunn, who arrived at the scene after Rose's father had called the police. Constable Nunn discovered fragments of a newspaper that had looked like they were used in an attempt to start a fire. The paper was the Anglian Daily Times. However, this was really weird, very shocking because no one at the Providence House read that publication. It was never delivered to them. They got a different newspaper. So this really stuck out to Constable Nunn. There was also a broken lamp on the floor, which they concluded was used in an attempt to start the fire because these are paraffin lamps. It was the 1900s. So it had paraffin oil and it would catch fire quite easily. When the local surgeon, Dr. Lay, arrived on the scene, he also noticed a medicine bottle, which he recognized as one he had recently given to a family that lived nearby. This family was the Gardeners. They lived only about 200 meters away. So, I don't know how many miles that is, but I was a swimmer, so I know 200 meters is what, like 8 laps of a 25-meter pool. So they lived pretty close. And this struck Dr. Lay as very odd. Like, why would that bottle be there? That belonged to the Gardeners. It had no reason to be in this home. Yeah, they live close, but why is there medicine there? Superintendent Stalton was the leader in the investigation for Rose's murder. Mrs. Crisp, who lived in the Providence house with her husband and Rose, reported hearing a scream around 1 a.m. to this Superintendent Stalton. And another neighbor also reported that they had heard the sound of breaking glass. Now, this is where I get a little confused in these cases because, I know it's the 1900s, but if you hear screaming and glass breaking, wouldn't you want to go make sure everything is okay? Wouldn't you want to go check on your neighbor? I would. I would be calling the police probably. So after doctors inspected the body, they ruled it a suicide. Now, I know. What? It's not a suicide. when I read that in my research, I was like, are you kidding me? It is not a freaking suicide. Her throat was slit. That's just not something people do when they commit suicide. She also had stab wounds, burns on her body. Like, none of that screams suicide to me. And I'm not even a crime scene worker. Like I'm literally just a teacher who likes crime. But anyways, Superintendent Stalton thankfully had a brain, and he saw the nature of her wounds among all of the other things, and he believed otherwise. He did not think that this was a suicide, thank God, because clearly it's not. So an inquest was conducted, and the extent of her injuries were revealed. She had been beaten and stabbed, as well as her throat being cut, and there were even several defensive wounds. Rose had marks on her hands, suggesting that she fought back against her attacker. Most shockingly, though, no one was expecting this. Apparently, Rose was 6 months pregnant at the time of her death. Not even her family knew this. So police began to focus on a man named William Gardner. Remember that name? The medicine bottle? Now, this was a married father of 6 and a very well known and respected man in the village. He worked as a foreman at the local seed drill factory, and this made him a pretty prominent member of the community. However, he also had a role as a lay preacher at the Methodist church that Rose attended, and that made him pretty noteworthy, which, don't they all in these stories? It's always a pillar of the community, right? He could never do that. Anyways, so while he was regarded with respect, he did have a reputation for being quite domineering, and while others admired him, they were also very wary of him. They were a little scared of him. And after looking further into his relationships, the police began to see a connection between him and Rose. Officers began to speculate that he was the father of Rose's unborn child. So, in their minds, they see it that he's fearing a scandal that would destroy his marriage and his reputation. So, they theorize that he arranged to meet with her that night and take care of the problem. Rose's funeral was held on June 5th, and the entire village showed up to pay their respects for this sweet girl. It seemed like she was just very well liked in the community. A lot of people showed up. Now, on the same day as her burial, William Gardner appeared before the local magistrates. The courthouse was packed. Everyone was extremely interested in, what he was going to say, what he was going to do. Would there be a trial? What is happening? During this time, William Gardner was innately dressed and appeared deeply aware of the seriousness of the situation. The hearing at this time was really brief and it needed more time for evidence. The evidence against him was largely circumstantial, but it was enough to raise a lot of suspicion. Many claim that he was near Rose's house the night of the murder. Additionally, the letter sent to Rose that night was said to match his handwriting. And even more damning is that his home subscribed to the same daily newspaper as the one found at the murder scene. So, this isn't looking good for William, but what reason did they have in the first place to suspect him of this? Why were they so intent on this man? Well, as I said before, Peasenhall was a small community and the rumor mill is always going. So, rumor has it that a year prior, William Gardner and Rose actually had been caught in the act, you know, inside the church by some locals who were passing by. This is not confirmed by William or his wife, but it is said that this caused a lot of talk among the town. Mr. Gardner's behavior following the murder was also described as very nervous and evasive. He did not provide clear answers during questioning at all. And despite all of this, there was still a lot of challenges to build a case against him. There was no direct evidence tying him to the scene, and his wife, of course, provided him with an alibi. She insisted, actually, that He had been at home during the storm. He'd been home due to the storm, and he wasn't going to leave because of it. So she dismissed any and all rumors about his and Rose's involvement, which, like, I don't know why she wouldn't. Even if it was happening, why would you admit that? And there were other suspects, don't get me wrong. There was one local unnamed man who had disputes with Rose. And then there was one man during the trial who admitted to writing Rose letters. However, all of these letters were dismissed. This podcast is sponsored by Dubby Energy Drinks. You guys, I have made a lot of questionable decisions in my life, but this is not one of them. Dubby is the best. If you've been searching for a clean alternative to an energy drink, look no further. Dubby is a clean energy drink mixture that's designed to help you feel productive without that nasty crash afterward. It's sugar-free, has no artificial dyes, no nasty fillers, and it's packed with vitamins, amino acids, and all the good stuff that we need to really help with focus. They also use 150 milligrams of caffeine per serving, which for me is the sweet spot where I feel like awake and productive, but not like I just chewed on a power line and I'm about to astral project against my will. And they have so many flavors, guys. They have unique ones like Japanese yuzu, and they even have a s'mores flavor. I also really love that it comes in tubs, so I can just mix it whenever I need it. And it feels a lot smoother and cleaner than traditional energy drinks. My life really loves the element of surprise, and Debbie has been coming through for me to get me through the day. So if you're like me and you've tried everything, but you keep getting disappointed, Dubby is here to save the day. Head on over to dubby.gg and use my code suspects10 to save some money and also save your nervous system. That's code suspects10 at dubby.gg. Link is in the show notes to get started. The letters weren't read aloud because apparently they were too spicy to read aloud in court for the time, which, like, I imagine back then was probably something along the lines of him telling her that he thought her ankles looked nice under her dress because he saw them showing or something. I don't know. The 1900s of it all. So they didn't want to read any of the letters from the other suitors aloud in court because it was just 1902. So that's why. The police remained very focused though on William Gardner, who was eventually actually charged for Rose's murder. He was committed to trial, which began on November 7th in 1902, and he pleaded not guilty. So he had a really good defense team. On his defense team, he actually had Henry Fielding Dickens, which is the son of Charles Dickens. And his defense was led by young barrister Ernest Wilde. No relation to Oscar Wilde or anything like that. Just Charles Dickens. Now, he stated that Gardner had been detained for far too long and raised concerns about delays in the case. He even stated that there was waxwork, which from what I understand was like an artwork that had been displayed in an exhibition in a seaside town of Yarmouth, so not too far away, that depicted Gardner as a guilty party. Basically, he claimed that this was influencing the public's opinion on his client and that his reputation had been tarnished because of this. So they wouldn't be able to have a fair trial. But Justice Graham said he didn't want to rush the case. So he listened to this and he was like, "You're right. Let's ensure that he has a fair trial due to the significance of the case." Now, the judge also informed them that he did not believe in the theory that Rose could have taken her own life. He was very dismissive of this. So ultimately, it was up to him, and this was enough to justify the trial. He did not think Rose took her own life, and he thought that this needs to be dealt with as a murder. The prosecution went on with their theory that Gardner had been involved in an inappropriate relationship with Rose, aka an affair, which resulted in her pregnancy. It was alleged that he, William, had written an anonymous letter to Rose arranging a meeting, and the letter was examined by handwriting experts, and they matched his handwriting. Now, the defense claimed he did not keep this appointment due to the severity of the storm that night. So this part stands out to me. His defense is saying, well, he didn't keep this appointment because there was a storm. So does that mean he admitted that he wrote the letter? he had planned to meet with her, but he just didn't go because there was a big storm. Well, if you weren't having an affair with her, then why are you trying to meet up with her in the middle of the night? That part really stuck out to me. That doesn't make any sense. It's very suspicious. William states that he stayed with his wife until 1:30 a.m., but the prosecution argues that no, he left, he met with Rose, he stabbed her, and then he poured paraffin oil and attempted to set her on fire, but was ultimately unsuccessful. Upon investigation of Mr. Gardner, they also found some other interesting evidence. One of those things being near Rose's body during the investigation. Investigators found a broken medicine bottle. Remember that? That medicine bottle was labeled for Mrs. Gardner and Mr. Gardner's children, and it also smelled quite strongly of paraffin oil. There was also a knife with traces of blood that was found in Mr. Gardner's possession. I don't think it's looking good for William right now. I think Mr. Gardner is looking pretty guilty. According to neighbors, they noticed footprints leading from Mr. Gardner's home to the Providence house where Rose worked. The prints even matched a pair of rubber-soled shoes that Mr. Gardner had. However, this discovery made by the neighbor was not reported until the 6th of June, so that's unfortunate. Another neighbor said he actually saw Mr. Gardner in his wash house on the morning of June 1st, and he couldn't really tell if he was washing his clothes or his person, but he was in his wash house that morning. Mr. Richards, who was a secretary of the seed drill factory where Mr. Gardner worked, testified that the envelopes that were found among Rose's belongings were very similar to those used in the factory where he worked. Mr. Richards even noted that Mr. Gardner frequently used these envelopes. So Rose's family at this time was struggling quite a bit. You know, their sweet daughter was murdered. These boys, their sister was murdered. And now her father also had to testify. And he was okay with that. He wanted to make sure that justice was served for his daughter. So when he testified, he described just the awful scene that he discovered, when he went to try and check on his daughter and ended up finding her body. Constable Nunn provided details about the crime scene, and he added that when he found the body, Rose was laying partially on the staircase and partially on the floor with a local newspaper beneath her head. He also noticed that the bed had not been slept in, and there was a letter on the desk with details about a midnight meeting. He goes on to say that there were some indecent verses in this letter. Mrs. Gardner also testified. She claimed that the medicine bottle found at the scene could have contained camphor oil. I think I'm saying that right. Camphor oil has a variety of uses. It has, anti-inflammatory properties, and it's often an ingredient in like vapor rubs and balms. People use it for congestion, things like that. So she stated that she once actually gave this to Rose when she had a cold, and that's why it was there in her home. She also stated that on the night of the 31st, she and her husband stayed with a neighbor named Mrs. Dickinson until 1:30 a.m. because Mrs. Dickinson had been frightened by the storm. And then they went home and they just went straight to bed. Now, Mrs. Gardner, she cooperated fully with the investigation. There was no issues there. She did everything asked of her. Mr. Gardner also fully cooperated. He was a little weird sometimes, but he did cooperate. They said that his reported movements were always very consistent, and none of them deviated from their original statements, neither him or Mrs. Gardner, which on one hand, that can be really good. It could show that this person isn't guilty. On the other hand, it could seem kind of rehearsed, sort of a catch-22. Now, Dr. J.C. Richardson, the coroner, he said that the postmortem examination showed that the 2 deep wounds to the throat had actually severed Rose's trachea, and that there was 1 wound to the chest and defensive cuts on her hands. He concluded that the burns occurred after death and once again ruled out suicide because, hello, yes, this is not a suicide. That's not what a suicide looks like. The prosecution also pointed to some letters that were found among Rose's possessions, including one that was about an alleged scandal between Rose and Mr. Gardner. However, the defense countered by highlighting the other quote unquote indecent letters. Superintendent Andrews confirmed that Mr. Gardner denied writing the letters or using the envelopes. So, Superintendent Andrews was part of Mr. Gardner's defense team. This guy had a lot of people on his team. Another witness who worked at the seed drill factory stated that about a year earlier, he overheard a conversation between Rose and Mr. Gardner at the church. This interaction included Rose mentioning to Gardner that she had been reading the Bible and she had been reading about what they had been doing that night. She referenced a passage in Genesis which implied that they had engaged in an affair. Mr. Skinner, who was the witness giving this testimony, overheard more of the conversation, but again, it was deemed unsuitable for public disclosure, whatever that means. I mean, at this point, just tell the people what they said. Like, just tell them what happened. Another witness named Mr. Wright actually corroborated Mr. Skinner's account and said Mr. Gardner's behavior with Rose had raised a lot of suspicions in town. They also, and when I say they, I mean Mr. Wright and Mr. Skinner, they shared these findings with their colleagues at the factory. So they told their coworkers what they had seen and what they had heard between Mr. Gardner and Rose. Now, Mr. Gardner was the foreman at the factory where they worked, and he accused them of misconduct. Both men actually received letters threatening legal action from Mr. Gardner if they did not apologize. However, Mr. Wright and Mr. Skinner never issued an apology. They said, no, we're not going to lie, and that's what we saw, and that's what we heard. We're not going to say sorry. And it seems like nothing was ever done, like it was just kind of an empty threat. The church had also made their own internal investigation, which I'm sure you know how this is going to go. And Mr. Gardner maintained his role as an upstanding member of the church, which we all saw coming. Harry Harsent, Rose's younger brother, testified that he had delivered several letters from Mr. Gardner to his sister. The letters were disclosed to the court. The prosecution relied very heavily on this relationship for the case. The defense continued to argue that all of this, including the evidence found at the scene, like, the envelopes, the medicine bottle, the newspaper, the footprints, etc., that this was not enough to convince anyone of his guilt due to the lack of direct evidence. Mr. Wilde, Gardner's defense attorney, his main attorney, argued that this was all based on circumstantial evidence, all of which he believed was just completely unreliable. He questioned that handwriting. He even suggested that maybe, it was forged to implicate Gardner and they only called one handwriting expert, which I guess they actually called two, but the two handwriting experts didn't agree. There were some differences, and one said, yes, it matches, and the other said, no, it doesn't. So we know now, in 2025, that handwriting analysis can be a little murky, but back then that's all they really had to go off of for the letters. So that's what they used. Now, the defense team also questioned the footprints found in the snow, and they even questioned the shoes, stating that they were very clean, implying that they had not been at the scene of a brutal murder. Which, hi, have you heard of soap and water? Because I'm pretty sure things can be cleaned off of boots. So yeah, that was their argument. They said Gardner's willingness to testify was also a sign of his innocence, that no guilty man would ever face cross-examination. I'm sorry. I'm laughing because it's like, what? What do you mean? How is that a sign of innocence? If he really did it, then it wouldn't be unusual for like a murderous narcissist to want to testify to seem like they had nothing to hide. Obviously, he didn't want his reputation tarnished, and I think it's pretty clear that an affair was happening at the very least. Plenty of people saw them together. He even wanted them to stop talking about it at work so much that he threatened legal action. Now, I mean, I'm just speculating here over a century later, but he seems pretty guilty to me. And if not him, then maybe the wife. But I think he had every reason to do it. He was well respected in the community and no one wanted to be on his bad side. Remember, he was even described as being domineering and people said they were wary of him. So no, I don't think that that is pointing to his innocence at all. Sorry. The defense also argued that the letters from him were very proper and unremarkable, unlike if they had an illicit relationship. Which, like earlier, they said that some of the letters found in Rose's room were kind of spicy, right? They were too spicy to read in court. So, were some of these from William? We don't know. But they suggested that Rose's child was another man's child who had been writing letters because, why would a church going man like Mr. Gardner, who writes unexplicit letters, be the father of the child? Which, like, are you kidding? I saw that one coming. Saw it coming from a mile away. I could smell it coming. They saw the opportunity to shame a dead woman for writing letters with men. Meanwhile, the men were the ones being explicit in the letters, from what I've seen, from what I've heard. And that doesn't mean that they were the fathers of the baby. I mean, what is a married father of 6 doing writing letters to Rose anyway? For what purpose does that serve him? I'd like to know that. So, I mean, if you didn't carry on a relationship with her, then why were you writing her letters? Rose was mentioned as being, remember, very shy, polite, and not having much of a social life at all. She wasn't seen like out on the town or even in the churches with these other men. She was never seen with these other men. They wrote her letters, yes, but she was seen with William every time. Now, in his closing remarks, he suggested that the case against his client was based on just a hideous mistake, and Gardner broke down in tears. The prosecution argued that the murder was premeditated and pointed again toward the evidence. After closing arguments, the judge sent the jury to deliberate. However, the jury was not able to come to a verdict, resulting in a hung jury. Now, Mr. Gardner, this wasn't the end of it. He was tried again in 1903, and this was presided over by Justice Lawrence this time. And the trial closely mirrored the first one and again led to a hung jury, this time 11-1 in favor of acquittal. So he was then taken back to a cell to await a third trial. So Mr. Gardner has been in a holding cell for quite some time now, and the defense is not happy. They actually argue that the case needs to be dropped completely because of the 2 hung juries. So Mr. Gardner was released. They let him go. They said, okay, we're not going to have the third trial. You're right. He can go. That's what they did. So he was released, but after this, his life was never quite the same. A lot of people in Peasenhall believed he was guilty and his reputation suffered a lot. He and his family actually ended up moving away, which didn't do them any favors. This ended up leaving the press and the public to speculate even more about what happened to Rose Harsent on May 31st, 1902. And it didn't just stop after, a few weeks or even a few years. This was for decades to come, and people were still talking about it. I mean, I just found this case and it's been over a century and it's still unsolved. So people want to know what really happened. Over time, more speculation came about. This time, though, not so much on Mr. Gardner. This time on Mrs. Gardner. Apparently, she had once written Rose a letter, and it said that when William went to sleep that night, People believe that she went to commit the murder because maybe they were having an affair and she found out about it. Now, will we ever know? Sadly, no, I don't think we will. This happened a long time ago and there was evidence that they collected, and I don't think that they're going to do anything with it, unfortunately. William Gardner remains one of the few in England's history who stood trial for murder without a verdict ever being reached. He got to live to be 74. He died in 1941. So, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, this is still considered a cold case. Personally, I think that there were way too many coincidences tying him into the murder. Allegedly. But I don't know. And that's the frustrating part about these cold cases. Are they interesting? Are they fascinating? Yes. I had no idea about this case. And when I found it, I was really interested in it. I wanted to know more about Rose. I wanted to know about her family. Unfortunately, though, they focused a lot on William and why he either did or didn't do it. And they focused a little bit less on Rose and what happened with her family afterward. I personally want to know what happened with her family. Did they continue to fight for Rose? What about her brothers? What about the brother that said he was personally delivering letters between Mr. Gardner and Rose? Doesn't that count for something? Like, I don't know. It's also frustrating. Cold cases are fascinating, but man, they get to me. I go down these deep rabbit holes and I don't think it does any good for my mental health, but I like to think that it does some kind of justice for the case because there's still people who want it to be solved. They still want justice to be served. So yeah, that was the story of the Peasenhall murder, the murder of Rose Harsent. Let me know your thoughts either in the Instagram or the Gmail account. You can comment under the post telling me your thoughts. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Let's get those reviews going. If you haven't followed the Instagram yet, go ahead and go over there and do that. If I create a TikTok, you guys will be the first ones to know. I'm dreading that, but if it happens, it happens, and hopefully it'll help the podcast. I love you all. Remember to trust your lizard brain. Please trust your intuition. Be aware of your surroundings. And if you see something, say something. Overreact. It's fine. You might save a life. Who knows? Just, be a good human, be a good person. And that's all I really have for you today. Thanks again for joining my true crime coven. I will talk to you guys later. Goodbye.